Robert Mueller's investigation found 10 possible acts of obstruction of justice. Let us examine what Mueller discovered in his own words as laid down by the report. Act 5, President Trump prevented the public disclosure of evidence. We begin before the election.
June 3, 2016. Shortly after his phone call with Russian pop star Emin Agalarov, Rob Goldstone, a New York publicist, emailed Trump Jr.
Emin just called and asked me to contact you with something very interesting. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with his father, Aris, this morning, and in their meeting offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia, and would be very useful to your father. This is obviously very high-level and sensitive information, but is part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump, helped along by Aris and Emin. What do you think is the best way to handle this information? And would you be able to speak to Emin about it directly? I can also send this info to your father via Rona, but it's ultra-sensitive, so I wanted to send it to you first.
Within minutes of this email, Trump Jr. responded, emailing back,
"Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. I'm on the road at the moment, but perhaps I just speak to Emin first. It seems we have some time, and if it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer. Could we do a call first thing next week when I'm back?"
Goldstone conveyed Trump Jr.'s interest to Emin Agalarov, emailing that Trump Jr.
wants to speak personally on the issue.
We jump ahead now, a year later, July 7, 2017. Trump is now president.
The following week, the president departed on an overseas trip for the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany, accompanied by Hope Hicks, Jared Kushner, and Ivanka Trump, among others. While the president was overseas, Hicks learned that the New York Times was working on a story about the June 9 meeting.
The next day, Hicks told the president about the story, and he directed her not to comment. Hicks thought the president's reaction was odd because he usually considered not responding to the press to be the ultimate sin. Later that day, Hicks and the president again spoke about the story. Hicks recalled that the president asked her what the meeting had been about, and she said that she had been told the meeting was about Russian adoption.
Then just say that.
On the flight home, Hicks obtained a draft statement about the meeting to be released by Trump Jr. and brought it to the president. The draft statement began with a reference to the information that was offered by the Russians in setting up the meeting.
I was asked to have a meeting by an acquaintance I knew from the 2013 Miss Universe pageant with an individual who I was told might have information helpful to the campaign.
Hicks again wanted to disclose the entire story, but the president directed that the statement not be issued because it said too much. The president told Hicks to say
only that Trump Jr. took a brief meeting and it was about Russian adoption.
Hicks texted Trump Jr. a revised statement that read,
"It was a short meeting. I asked Jared and Paul to stop by. We discussed a program about the adoption of Russian children that was active and popular with American families years ago and since ended by the Russian government. But it was not a campaign issue at that time, and there was no follow-up."
"Are you okay with this? Attribute it to you?"
Trump Jr. responded by text message that he wanted to add the word primarily before discussed so that the statement would read, "We primarily discussed a program about the adoption of Russian children." Trump Jr. texted that he wanted to change because they started with some Hillary thing, which was BS, and some other nonsense, which we shot down fast.
I think that's right, too, but boss man worried it invites a lot of questions. Ultimately defer to you and your attorney on that word because I know it's important, and I think the mention of a campaign issue adds something to it in case we have to go further.
If I don't have it in there, it appears as though I'm lying later when they inevitably leak something.
Trump Jr.'s statement, adding the word primarily and making other minor additions, was then provided to the New York Times. The full statement provided to the Times stated,
It was a short introductory meeting. I asked Jared and Paul to stop by. We primarily discussed a program about the adoption of Russian children that was active and popular with American families years ago and since ended by the Russian government. But it was not a campaign issue at the time, and there was no follow-up. I was asked to attend the meeting by an acquaintance, but I was not told the name of the person I would be meeting with beforehand.
The statement did not mention the offer of derogatory information about Clinton or any discussion of the Magnitsky Act or U.S. sanctions, which were the principal subjects of the meeting.
A short while later, while still on Air Force One, Hicks learned that Priebus knew about the emails, which further convinced her that additional information about June 9 meeting would leak and the White House should be proactive and get in front of the story. Hicks recalled again going to the president to urge him that they should be fully transparent about the June 9 meeting, but he again said no, telling Hicks,
"You've given a statement, we're done."
Later on the flight home, Hicks went to the president's cabin, where the president was on the phone with one of his personal attorneys. At one point, the president handed the phone to Hicks.
The attorney told Hicks that he had been working with Circa News on a separate story and that she should not talk to the New York Times. On July 19, 2017, the president met with reporters for the New York Times. In addition to criticizing Sessions in the Times interview, the president addressed the June 9, 2016 meeting and said he
didn't know anything about the meeting at the time. As I've said, most other people, you know, when they call up and say, by the way, we have information on your opponent, I think most politicians, I was just with a lot of people, they said, who wouldn't take a meeting like that?
In other words, what American politician wouldn't take compromising information on their opponent from a foreign power, in this case, one whose hostility to America dates back 71 years? Back to the report.
After consulting with the president on the issue, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders told the media,
"The president certainly didn't dictate the statement, but that he weighed in, offered suggestions like any father would do."
Several months later, the president's personal counsel stated in a private communication to the special counsel's office that the president dictated a short but accurate response to the New York Times article on behalf of his son, Donald Trump, Jr.